he's in a lot of trouble. Snapmare, no. Oh, look at that move by Beefcake. He dropped him just like a bad habit.
Well, that brought this capacity crowd to their feet.
Davey Boy tried to go over the back, G, but he didn't make it.
I did not see that. I have not seen that before from Brutus Beefcake. That is quite a move indeed.
Brutus Beefcake is coming off a long way here in the World Wrestling Federation. And he goes with the hammerlock and rams the shoulder of Davey Boy right into that top turnbuckle and makes the tag to the hammer. And the hammer unloading with a beautiful elbow right off the top turnbuckle. The tide has turned here. The pendulum has shifted and is now in favor of the champions.
And just that quick, too. That's the amazing part of this great sport.
Perhaps shoulder breaker. Oh, yes. And well executed.
You called it, Gorilla.
Oh, look at that. He didn't want the 3 count. I can't believe it.
You've got to be kidding me.
The hammer taking a big chance here. Probably could have had a 3 count. Davey Boy perched up on that second rope. What's he thinking about? Oh. Holy Moses, rammed right head first. And down. It's over. That's right there. It's over.
I can't believe it.
History made here at WrestleMania 2.
You have got to be kidding me. This place is coming apart.
Pandemonium broken loose here in the Rosemont Horizon as history made in WrestleMania 2 as we have new World Wrestling Federation Tag Team Champions.
There's some things you always take for granted in life, and one of those things is the unity and friendship of the British Bulldogs. This is Jim Davies in the Stampede Wrestling locker room, and there was a terrible misunderstanding in that last boat. Dynamite Kid thought that Davey Boy Smith had ambushed him.
Wait 1 minute. I didn't think for 1 second it was Davey Boy Smith. I know for a fact it was Davey Boy Smith who come to the ring and hit me over the head with a stick. Why? I don't know. But my own belief is, Davey Boy Smith, you are jealous of the Dynamite Kid. You've been jealous from the Dynamite Kid from day one. It was only 2 days ago when I spoke to the good Lord Almighty himself, the good Lord John Foley. He said, kid, never trust Davey Boy Smith. He told me that 7, 8, 9 years ago. Davey Boy, you try to double-cross me. I was in that ring. I spilled my blood with Johnny Smith. He spilled his blood. The match had nothing whatsoever to do with you. But no, you had to come in, hit me over the head with a stick.
You're making a mistake.
I'm not making no mistake. I did not touch him with that stick. Everybody in the arena knows it was Bob Brown. Why would I hit you with a stick? Listen, why would family tell lies? Johnny Smith told me.
Johnny Smith.
You're just a dirty low-life flyer. 2,000 people in the arena saw you whack Dynamite with a cane. I saw you whack him with it. I know you whacked him with it. You just
He did not.
Yeah, he did. You whacked him right on the back of the head. You interfered in the match. You should have kept your nose out of him. You've always been right on the Dynamite team.
Family does not tell lies. Johnny Smith is my family, and as from now, you are not.
Holy. We need some help in here. We need some help. They're going after Davey Boy Smith. It's Johnny Smith and Dynamite Kid after Davey Boy. Here comes Chris Benoit. It's mayhem. Benoit gets slammed down. Now it's Smith. They're going after Benoit. Dynamite Kid and Johnny Smith. We need more help in here. Ron Ritchie. This is insanity. This is insanity. Obviously, Davey Boy Smith and Dynamite Kid are finished.
This is the Pro Wrestling Spotlight, presented by Hami Media and the Pro Wrestling Reflection, where we discuss the very best of the best in pro wrestling history.
And what's it gonna do when Hulkamania and the largest arms in the world run wild on you?
The two soundest wrestlers in the World Wrestling Federation, maybe in the history of the World Wrestling Federation, are right here, right now. Mr. Perfect and the excellence of execution, the Hitman.
WrestleMania weekend isn't complete without the Heartbreak Kid, and he is on his way.
He put hard times on Dusty Rhodes and his family.
They think they got the answers. I change the question. you will rest in peace.
Get used to it in Ric Flair. Who you're looking at, the man.
We're doing it live, Reflection Nights. We're doing it live. And every time we do it live, this motherfucker is turning his back on the professor. This motherfucker is like, redecorating the Hall of Wonders. This motherfucker is like, he's dismissive of all the Reflection Nights on the videos, on the audios. But you know what? I am right in your faces. I am right on the speakers for all the Reflection Nights. For the Magnificent 7, the Elite 8, the Naughty 9, the Terrific 10, the Hami Nights, the Big Vitoites, the Reflection Nights, all the ites all over the world, the left, the right, the Dems, the Repubs. This motherfucker's still looking around. What the hell is this dude? He's doing? Gee, you know what? We've been doing this for 7 years, Reflection Nights. It's nothing new to the professor. It's just more, as the years wane, I get depressed sometimes. It's a mental thing right now. I just want him to look at me. No gay shit. Thank you. He's looking at me finally. But anyway, welcome to the PWR podcast here at the Hami. He is still looking around with the welcome to the PWR podcast here at the Hami Media Group at podbeam.com. And welcome to the PWR Spotlight. And before we even talk about who we're doing a spotlight on, it's a tag team edition of the Spotlight. I must introduce myself because I am vain like that. I must introduce myself so I can get a couple of years younger, so I can lose those gray hairs on my face, lose the gray hairs on my head, lose the gray hairs on my ass cheeks. But it is what it is. Don't give me that look. See, now you're looking at me because I say something.
On your ass cheeks?
It's great, but neither here nor there. But now he's looking at me. He's not looking around. He's not looking down. But once I say something like that, he's looking at me attentively. Thank you very much. But anyway, I am the most charismatic one. I am the most scholarly one. I am the most effervescent one. I am the most affluent one. But most importantly, I am the most glorious one. The only objective man in this IWC, YWC, PWC punditry. The only objective man in this political spectrum. You're a friend of mine, the Professor Chabel Cruz. And I'm not here alone. No. I am here with my brother from another mother, the conservative liberal, the liberal conservative, the man that has no shame right now. He is, for the audio Reflection Nights, he is wearing a Michigan State shirt. Even though what's going on right now with Michigan State, their football coach is a pedophile. Nah, he's not a pedophile, but he is an alleged rapist. He's an alleged sex offender. He's an alleged, he's a groper. I don't know what he is, but right now, he is looking at some hard times. He is looking at some hard times. Not like Big Boss Man hard times, but he's looking at some hard times coming up. He is your friend of mine, Mr. Wonderful, Dum Dum doing its own. Tommy Wonder. Don't take off the shirt. You are what you are. You are Michigan State Spartan through and through, but you know what? We just had to, I had to let the cat out the bag for all the audio Reflection Nights. I'm not saying that I believe the victim, but you know what? Innocent until you're proven guilty. Isn't that the saying, TW?
It used to be.
Mm-hmm. Short and sweet to the point. Short and sweet to the point. I thought you wanted to vent. I thought you wanted to ramble. I thought you wanted to say something.
I just feel like, when you hear the word sexual assault, you think some heavy shit went down, and you hear what he's actually accused of doing, you have questions. And you know what?
Questions that
maybe
Quincy
we'll lose a couple listeners.
Is it questions that Quincy can answer? Matlock can answer?
No, it's a simple question. If this dude's on a phone and she's somewhere else also on the phone and he's doing something that she's disgusted by, then why is she still on the phone? That's all. That's my only question. But what I'm saying is, A, Why are we guilty until proven so? That's got to end. B, and this might cost us a couple listeners, but listen, I don't convict people without evidence. And so this whole believe the accuser nonsense, yeah, that was great until a bunch of them got caught lying. And I'm not just going to automatically assume someone's telling the truth, especially when it's some stuff where you just question it. Like, if you and I are on the phone call and I even have an inkling that you're doing that on the other end, I'm hanging up, Professor. I'll tell you to call. I'll text you later. Call me back when you're done. But I'm not going to stay on the phone. And then I'm not
unless I text you a picture of me doing that, so then that would be equally as bad. So
then I'm going to say, so first of all, call back, but make it FaceTime. Don't make it we're going to get canceled. That was probably a little too far. I'm just saying, whether she's lying or he's lying, someone's lying. The guy admitted doing what she said he did, but said, oh, P.S., her and I were in a consensual relationship. So this is a big case of he said, she said. And if you remember a few years back, my namesake, my good man, Kobe Bryant, was he guilty of cheating on his wife? Absolutely. Was that girl that he was cheating on his wife with trying to fleece that dude for some money? Absolutely. And that's my problem.
Was that girl from Colorado a dog? Absolutely too. So, it is what it is.
And we're not going to talk about the details of that story, but the fact that she said he could do it there, but not there, and he did it there anyway, sounds like bullshit to me.
Yeah, so, it is what it is. You're right. It is a he said, she said it. You know what? Reflectionites, since we are very nostalgic, Google that movie with Michael Douglas and Demi Moore, Disclosure. That's the same thing that just happened, but it's it was more white. For Vince McMahon. Well, that too. But again, it's illegal to be a sugar daddy. So, this guy from Michigan State should have been a sugar daddy, and then it could have been a tax evasion thing instead of sexual harassment. But it's neither here nor there. We're not talking about today's politics. We're not talking about today's pop culture. We are doing what we do best. We are the most nostalgic podcast out here in this IWC, YWC, PWC punditry. And it's apropos, TW, that we do a PWR spotlight. We haven't done a real spotlight where we honed in on somebody in a while, because again, the last spotlight we did, circumstances was beyond our control, but we did a freestyle one. This time we just go back to the formula, but we add a little bit of freestyle elements to it. But I thought it was apropos, just like last week I told TW, we're going to do a tag team spotlight, and we're going to focus on the career of one of the top 10 tag teams probably ever in professional wrestling history. But again, it's very debatable, because that's a good way to start it, right? We're going to talk about the career of the Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith, respectively, the British Bulldogs, TW. And again, people will put them on that Rushmore as a top 10 tag team of all time. The pedigree is there, and we'll talk about it. And I'm going to kind of hyphen it up, TW, first, but then I'm going to elaborate more as we go on with this show. But they started out first as opponents. They had a feud with each other. So you already know that formula, the chemistry is there between Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith. The athleticism is there for both of them. And of course, they went to the WWF. And of course, they were at the right place at the right time. And not by the WWF standards, TW. I'm saying the 80s standards, where tag team wrestling was at a premium. And you needed faces, you needed recognizable team names, and you couldn't get more recognizable than the British Bulldogs. And, the old school British Bulldogs, whether they were wearing the red trunks with the Bulldog symbol on the back of their butts, or when they were at WrestleMania 2, where they wore, I think it was like navy blue, navy teal blue, and the gold, not the gold, but the brown, Bulldog standards. I don't know if it was on their thighs or their butts too, but that was some excellent, gear that they were wearing. And of course,
not navy teal.
Thank you very much. I love when TW corrects me on my grammar and on the logistics. But and then they had the tights with the UK flag on their butts too. So TW, like I said, in the 80s, tag teams were a premium. What say you about the British Bulldogs? Do they belong in that conversation as a top 10 tag team of all time? Or, do you see something different? Or is it just because as the years wane, because now we're in 2023, back then there was no FTR. Back then, there was no Young Bucks. Back then, there was no, Eliminators. Back then, there was no Harlem Heat. You know what I mean? More tag teams have come along the pike. So, have they ever lost that top 10 mantle, or they will always still be a top 10 true and true on anybody's Rushmore, in your humble opinion?
So you said that the tag teams, not the WWE standard, but in the first match that you had me watch against Valentine and Beefcake, the Dream Team, Vince McMahon said, tag team wrestling is at an all-time high here. And I would argue, yes, it went away. But tag team wrestling in the 80s got as big as it got because of the WWE. Because I don't even think AEW, and if they did, it would Conquistadors. I'll give you but they
no, I'm not. But I have to push back. It's not because of the WWE. It was the NWA. It was AWA.
Well,
the Road Warriors. All that stuff.
I got a point. Point.
Go ahead with the point.
At any given time, the NWA or the AWA, yeah, they had great tag teams, but they had 4 of them. What I was saying is, in 87 and 88, you had 2 different Survivor Series matches with 10 tag teams in it. I don't even think AEW has 10 tag teams right now, and if they do, it would be throwing 2 guys together, or like 2 young dudes.
I think people will say AEW, supposedly when they started in 2019, TW. I understand where you're going with, but I'm the most objective man in this. They have a roster of tag teams.
The reason
they had a 10-team roster deep. I don't know about now, but they did. They started like that.
I brought them up because they would be the closest thing to the modern day of 1987, 88. And they were 10. There was different teams in each year. There were some that were on both, but there were teams that were on the first one that weren't on the second one. So you're talking 14, 16 tag teams, right? My point being, every single one of them, including the Conquistadors by that time, before they were jobbers, but when they got there, they all could have won it, and you wouldn't have been surprised by any of them winning it, right? So I would say, to say Vince hates tag team wrestling, I think Vince might not have got it because he wants to see the Hulk Hogan's, the John Cena's, the stars. And in that first match, had Beefcake not got hosed by Honky Tonk Man, that first match of the Dream Team versus Bulldog and Dynamite, 3 out of the 4 guys would have been Intercontinental Champions. And that means Davey Boy and Valentine both were 2/3 of the Triple Crown, which is unheard of. Pedro did it. He got the Triple Crown. And then one other, Brett did it. Sean did it. Now a million guys have done it since. But back then, I don't think we truly appreciate the careers that Davey Boy, and he was European champion, and Greg the Hammer Valentine to a lesser extent. I mean, this guy had the NWA US title. He was probably tag team champions there too. We look at a lot of guys in the history of WWE that never had a belt in WWF, right? WWE. And yet Bulldog and Hammer, under our nose, were 2/3 of the Triple Crown champion. And I don't even think we realize it in the moment, right? First of all, the tag team title and the Intercontinental for Bulldog were so far apart. But then didn't he win them again with someone else? Him and Owen had them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
but wait, I'm asking a different question. Now you're going on a different tangent.
What I'm saying is those tag teams, Vince would vault singles careers out of them. That's what I'm saying. He didn't want to keep people in tag teams. He wanted tag team wrestling to draw, but he also wanted to find out who was the Marty Jannetty and who was the Shawn Michaels. And if you look at the WWF and the history of them, and even the Dudley Boys didn't do it there, but they've done it since in other places, Impact or whatever. All these tag teams, there's at least one of them that wants more, right?
Okay.
And in this case, it was Bulldog, not Dynamite. But my point is, tag team wrestling was as big as it was, at least for me in my life, in my time, especially fast forward, the Dudleys, the Hardys, and Edge and Christian, those 3 tore it up all the time. And all these guys ended up becoming singles guys. So I think that's where the WWE disconnect is with the fans. They don't keep people tag teams. They make stars out of one of them.
No, I get that. But the question was with the tag teams of the Evolution. My question was, are the British Bulldogs still a top 10?
Absolutely.
That's all. I understand where you're going with this, but I was like, wait a minute. I think
you said a lot before you turned it over to me, and one of the things was it wasn't WWE standard, but tag team wrestling was hot. I was disagreeing with it not being a WWE hot, right? But I would compare them because Bulldog went on to have a nice singles career and more tag team stuff. I would say that they count, and I think because of this, I will bump them up my list. Probably put them back at 3 where they belong, behind the Rockers and the Brainbusters, because that window is similar to the Austin window. He was around before it, but that window of Austin 316 at 2 to 3 years where there was nothing bigger ever to this day. If Austin's going to be considered one of the GOATs in singles wrestling, when he only had that small window before he got hurt and had to quit, then the Bulldogs should be there too, because two of the things that we're talking about today, one of them's in Japan, one of them's in Calgary. I think Japan. Yeah. No, I might have watched a different thing in Japan that you didn't tell me to watch. The Bulldogs versus the Malenkos.
I didn't tell you to watch that one.
Right.
If you want to talk about that, we'll talk about that later, but that's okay.
But the point is, these guys also did stuff outside of the WWE that we might not have known about then, but I find out a little bit more every day from doing this show with you. I mean, I knew about the Rock and Roll Express match, but they did do more stuff. There was a bigger window than we remember, but the window for WWE was like 86 to 88, 89, and then they kind of fell off.
If we want to say with the Bulldogs, especially on the WWE scale, it was actually 84 to 88. So, and in that parameter reflectionites where Tommy is saying, and I want to expound on that because I agree with you a little bit because of what you said with Austin. That 80s tag team wrestling scene is a boom period. It's the pinnacle, whatever. Like I said, with the NWA, the Road Warriors, the Rock and Rolls, the Midnights, Bulldogs, Foundation,
Russians,
Long Riders, Russians. But that was the boom period of tag team wrestling. That was the boom period where all tag team wrestlers' stocks were at its highest, at its phoenix. It was crypto. It was at its most valuable point before it fizzled out. And then the 90s, and then of course the 90s and the 2000s. We could celebrate certain tag teams. Billy Ray Valentine from the PWHustle says the Eliminators are one of his favorite tag teams of all time. I don't know where he puts that on his mantle. I love the Eliminators from the ECW myself, but I can't say they're the top 3 tag team of all time. It's more subjective, but I love them. But as you say with they could be
your favorite and not be the best.
Right. And being subjective, again, people have always said Road Warriors are 1, but then the Dudleys, because of the longevity and what they've done, should be 1A or 2. So that's the same thing. So that's the thing. That's what I was trying to say with the Bulldogs, because again, the evolution of tag teams, some people's stock has risen. Some people have done more. Like FTR right now, one of my favorite. You already know FTR is one of my favorite tag teams because of what they do, what they represent. You might not like some of their political stuff or their tangents on social media. I get you with that, but I'm only going with what's in the ring. They're one of the best tag teams in the last 5-6 years, from what they started in NXT to what they're doing now in AEW and all the accomplishments per se. So I think FTR has moved up into the top 10. So you might have to, Reflectionites, take somebody from the boom period of the 80s down. Easy thing would probably be the Killer Bees, but that's just me. But I'm just saying, TW, you get where I'm going. If you got to move like FTR or the Dudleys into your top 10, some of the boom period tag teams, the Long Riders, even Manny Fernandez, Rick Rude, and the Killer Bees. Even if you want to be funny with the Conquistadors, you got to move them down off the top 10. And some of these new tag teams. Do you agree with that assessment or something like that?
Right, but there's 2 different lists. I always tell people the music analogy. You know, if you see an album that says greatest hits, that's an album of songs that were commercially successful. If you see an album that says best of, that means the band put together the list, said these are our best songs, what they think are, right? So the Dudley Boys, they're top 5 if you're talking accolades, right? Because they've won it everywhere. And FTR, they're the modern day version of that. Now, I will say this. This is going to hurt your feelings.
Don't hurt my feelings. I'm very sensitive right now.
FTR stands out because they're not like the modern flippy floppy tag teams now. They are a throwback to the shit we liked, where the Bulldogs and the Killer Bees were the only ones flipping around until the Rockers came around. Most of it was ground-based, teamwork, all that stuff. Still awesome, but it was hard-hitting. It was double teaming more than it was moonsaults. And I'm glad you didn't say Young Bucks, because the one that looks like Dwight Yoakam, the older, balder one. I don't even know if he's older. He does the same sequence where he does like 17 high spots in a row in the exact same order, and then gets in the ring and does this, and everyone goes, "This is awesome." And if I was there, I'd go again, because he does the exact same formulated shit, and the people eat it like pigs eating in a trough. But the FTR isn't like that, so they stand out for that reason. But if you put the FTR in 87, 88, they're not even close to the best. That's what I would say. Is they're good because they remind us of earlier times. Much like LA Knight, people give him... FTR is the tag team version of LA Knight. They do things that the Brainbusters did. They do things that the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express, the Bulldogs, they do stuff like that, which is awesome for you and me because we're older. But I think if we were younger and they existed then, Tully and Arn, we already had one. We didn't need a second one.
No,
right?
I get you. But again, it's very subjective.
But modern day, they're great.
Right. As the evolution goes, people's top tens have to change with the times.
They've been SmackDown and Raw champs, right? And NXT and AEW and New Japan, or was it AAA?
Both.
Ring of Honor.
All that. Yeah. The accolades are right there.
They've got the pedigree, if you will. But anytime you say the Dudley Boys, and this isn't just because of personal feelings, I would pick Edge and Christian over Dudley's, Hardy's, and FTR up to put up in the hierarchy.
Everybody is subjective, but reflection, as we said with the question, does the British Bulldogs stand the test of time to still be considered the top 10? Again, it's very subjective to the person with
one title ring.
The Bulldogs?
Yeah.
In WWE, yes. Just one.
And that's back when one meant something. Like nobody ever had it twice.
Yes. So with that being said, let's talk about David Smith and Tom Billington, respectively. That's their government names. And they are known as the British Bulldogs, TW. So, the funny thing about the British Bulldogs is, they are from Leeds, England. It's not kayfabe. It's actually, it's the truth. They are Wyndon, England. I forget which town they were in. But TW, the one thing about them is that, like I said, they started in their careers as foes, as adversaries to each other. And by the way, Reflectionites, they were discovered by the Hearts. That's why they went all the way to Canada in Stampede Wrestling, because one of the scouts was actually Bruce Hart that brought them both into the Stampede area, TW. So I'm just giving you the logistics. First, it was the Dynamite Kid, because the Dynamite Kid, I think, wrestled maybe a year or two more than Davey Boy Smith. But Dynamite was already building a rep because of his style, being 5'6", 185 pounds. But no one really But no one looked at him I'm not going to say no one looked at him as small, but the style that he brought into the ring, especially his matches in New Japan and All Japan Wrestling against Tiger Mask, which is what kind of like everybody in the wrestling bubble, like the Vince McMahons and the Stu Harts, actually looked at him saying, this guy's got something. He brought a different athleticism to that. I didn't tell you to watch that match, but that's where I'm going with it. So let's say about the styles that Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith bring collectively together.
They are smaller, right? Like the match against the Rock and Roll Express, you're like, holy man, they're evened up. But I think modern day wrestling,
let me. Dynamite Kid is my height, 5'8", 5'9". Davey Boy is maybe 5'11", 6 feet at the most. So I'm just wanted to get
in a world where guys are 6'2", 6'3", and 6'9". So that's what I mean by smaller. They're not small by any stretch of the imagination.
No, I just want to get the logistics. Well, go ahead.
That European style over there was hard hitting. I would say, it's funny. I never set foot in Europe, but that was how I think they had the same mentality I had. Like, you might think wrestling's not real, but when you're done watching me, you're gonna second guess it and be like, maybe it is here. Maybe over here it's real and over there it's not. And even all these matches that we watched to do this show, they lay it in, man. They don't, like, that dude headbutted people for real, much like Benoit. They just, he had an undeniable, and I think the British accent helps it. It's almost like the Green Street Hooligans, like those soccer fans that go around beating the shit out of the rival team's fans. they're not anything to look at, but they will fuck you up. And there's something about them that's intimidating. Dynamite Kid, even though he was the smaller one, and by the way, Davey Richards, if that's not Dynamite's illegitimate son, I don't know.
Hey.
23 needs to be on the scene. He looks just like him. It's when I'm watching these matches, I'm like, that's that Davey Richards guy right there, man. And
he went all around the world. He found a couple of rats, and maybe one of those rats was Davey Richards' mom.
Where's he from, Davey Richards? He's from the States?
I believe Seattle, Washington, if I remember.
Okay, yeah. So the WWE went there, and that's not far from Edmonton. So he probably was laying some pipe down there. But he had such a hard-hitting style that you could not, like, you would look at, like I always say, I look in the guys that they're comic books, they're He-Man, they're larger than life. You would look in to the ring at Dynamite Kid and go, I wouldn't fuck with him. I ain't fighting him in a bar. You know,
and looking at Dynamite Kid, TW, before we even talk about some of the matches and even the histrionics of the British Bulldogs, Dynamite Kid in the ring was so fluid and fast. I mean, he threw a guy to the ropes, right? And you know the spot like in AEW and NXT where the guys and the gals kind of like throw each other to the ring, but then they kind of catch up with you, you know, and that stupid shit. Like it's like going back and forth. Like I'm gonna try to throw you off the ropes, but then I'm chasing after you.
Right.
Dynamite did that first. He threw you off the ropes and was going 60, 70 miles an hour to throw that clothesline. That was one of the most impressive things about the Dynamite Kid was the speed. Because again, I didn't look at Dynamite Kid as small. I looked at him as fast, but with the body structure that he had, you know, he took steroids and all that stuff. I'm not gonna excuse that. But I didn't look at small. I look at powerful, fast. I looked at him as a hybrid. What say you about Dynamite Kid and what he did? You talked about the headbutts. You talked about him going off the top with the headbutts, but the clotheslines, the suplexes, and all that stuff. Because we know the pedigree of the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith. We'll get to that in a second. But I want to at least let's focus on the Dynamite Kid because I don't think he gets enough, not enough credit. But you know, after they broke up in the 90s, you know, British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith took the name, the trademarks, and all that stuff. So it was very bitter and petty at the end. But let's not talk about that. But let's just try to give respect and some kudos to Dynamite Kid. What say you about Dynamite Kid's style?
There's an entire company based in Jacksonville, Florida, that give Dynamite Kid lots of credit. And sadly, a lot of them are going to end up like him because they don't know better, right? He was ahead of his time. He absolutely inspired way more people than people realize, including me. To this day, if someone does a snap suplex, somebody's referencing Dynamite Kid, whether it be the commentators or you at home watching it going, like Dynamite Kid. And I watched a couple of them snap suplexes.
This is breaking news. So Dynamite Kid brought Los Rudos to the map, you could say, or the
No, I'm saying he was you know, it's funny because you were saying how they feuded with each other first, and they were very skinny. That was pre-roids when those two were going at it. That was me and Rico. My first 11 matches were against Rico, and then we were a tag team for 2.5 years, and then off and on again in the end. But it's almost this parallel, 10 years apart from the Bulldogs. You know, we did the same thing. But they were the smaller guys in the big man's world. And they like, he's the first one, right? Like, I mean, Pedro wasn't that big, but he was an old man by the time I started watching. So he wasn't really anybody you were watching win. He might have beat the jobbers or whatever, but he'd be the guy putting over Valentine or whoever in a main event or a pay-per-view. But Dynamite and Davey Boy and then the Rockers obviously had a huge influence on me because I even tried to look like those dudes. But they were the first ones there, and they didn't, like, you know, I don't know if people see it the way I see it. I would assume not, but you know,
everything's very subjective though.
No. I'm sure people that have wrestled are going to look at it the same way as me, but I mean, like a regular fan, you're not going to notice. You'll notice a botch, but you're not going to notice where somebody's not in the right place like I do, right?
Gotcha.
My favorite of all, I bring it up all the time, I'll bring it up again, is when Michaels against Mankind in your house, where they're trying to do this Irish whip in the corner, and Shawn Michaels finally gets so pissed at him, he just stomps at him and starts beating the shit out of him for real. Cactus Jack, to his credit, figured out, oh, okay. And then they got on track and they went on to have one of the best matches ever that a lot of people don't talk about. But Michaels versus Mankind in Your House was a great match. And that one little spot in there. And the Bulldog has one with Vader, where Vader's just stiffing him. And Bulldog's like, look, man, lay off, Leon. I'm one of 4 guys that'll work you. Stop it. And then when he hurt him again, Davey Boy shoots on him and starts beating the shit out of Vader in the ring, right? And most people just think it was a called spot. No, he got sick and tired of Leon pummeling him and then swung back. I had to do that against Manny Fernandez and Bo James. But those guys gave me the confidence to defend myself if someone tried to eat me up. And Johnny K9, God rest his soul, I know he did some bad things in life, but Bruce Bedlam, he was a good man to me, and he gave me pointers. Look, kid, you're small. If someone comes at you like that and you don't take it, you're not getting another one. He was especially against me. So he was teaching me what to look for when a bigger guy was gonna let me take something, and then also told me if they ain't giving you nothing, take it. And those guys did it when they were smaller, even though obviously Bulldog is the size of a fucking minivan, but he's still small next to Psycho Sid or Kevin Nash.
Let's not talk about Davey Boy. Again, like I said, I want to give kudos to Dynamite.
Dynamite's even smaller. That's my point.
No, but Dynamite, visually, Reflection Nights, if you don't know Dynamite, which...
He's the Bulldog.
He is the Bulldog, but I was going to call him the Tasmanian Devil. Because the way he's so fast, he's so fluid and all that stuff. Again, like I said, the clotheslines... He was quick. He was 70-mile-an-hour clotheslines, the snap suplexes, and all that stuff. He wrestled Reflection Nights again. I don't want to say that he wrestles like this guy because I'm not disrespecting him, but you get where I'm going with that because, like you said, he put his body on the line no matter what he did with his style. Again, but Darby Allin, not that but. If you tunnel vision with, I want to make the crowd happy. I want to do whatever it takes to make the match good and memorable, and you're happy paying your money to see me. Dynamite Kid is no different than Darby Allin. Their approaches are different. Don't get me wrong, but I think that's the same.
I would go with someone better than Darby Allin that's similar. And if I'm picking up what you're laying down, Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle got hurt doing offense because he would do whatever, and that's what wrecked Dynamite was the headbutt off the top rope, the suplex out of the ring, all the stuff he did that he did it for the fans. And I don't even mean not just the stuff where he bumped, the stuff where he's bumping you, but he also gets hurt. Eddie Guerrero, frog splash off the top of the cage. Snuka did it. Eddie did it.
Or Benoit. Chris
Benoit is Dynamite. That is the #1 Dynamite Kid prototype. He's the guy that wanted to be Dynamite Kid. That's why he was the Pegasus Kid, because he wanted to be like Dynamite. But that's another one, and it doesn't end well for these guys usually. Darby Allin, I think I like that Darby does this shit. That's how we're supposed to fall. If you ever trip and fall, Professor, turn to your back. Your back is built to take a bump. That's why you have shoulder blades, right? Darby does that stuff. So he doesn't do. Jungle Boy would be the idiot here who's careless. And no offense to Dynamite, but at times he was careless, reckless, Yeah. But what I was gonna say is between him and Bulldog, he's the mouthpiece. He's the guy. Bulldog is just there. No offense to Bulldog either, but he wasn't the leader. It was Dynamite. And Dynamite held his own. And like I said, there's an entire company in Jacksonville, Florida, built with people who, if they weren't straight up fans of Dynamite Kid, they were fans of Benoit or other guys who were like Dynamite Kid. And it just paid it forward.
Well, again, logistically, Reflection Nights, again, they started in Stampede Wrestling thanks to the scouting abilities of Bruce Hart. So Dynamite was first, Davey Boy was second, and they feuded with each other. TW, do you know why they feuded with each other first and foremost?
Nope.
Because Dynamite Kid, Mr. Billington himself, accused Davey Boy Smith of being a test tube Betty. I'm not joking. That's the quote. And that's how the feud started with them in the early 80s.
Test tube baby?
Maybe he was accusing Davey Boy by not being procreated naturally. He was, his father just went to a sperm bank in Leeds, England, or whatever the case may be. Reflection Nights. I'm not joking here. these are in my notes. I just wanted to bring that out because it's so simplistic, TW. All he just said is those 3 words, test tube, baby, and we got a feud. We got a money feud with these two going at it with each other.
Stole that from Red Fox for the record.
It is what it is. But again, you steal what's going on in pop culture. So that was a perfect way for, Dynamite and Davey Boy Smith to at least start with each other. Like you said, before the roids kicked in, they're small, so they have to stand out in some way, shape, or form. And like you said, Dynamite Kid is the mouthpiece. Dynamite Kid has a lot of confidence in himself because, again, he was already, he was a world traveler. He went from Canada to Japan and back and forth. He's the world traveler. He's the guy with the rep. Davey Boy just looks like a virgin just trying to break his cherry. He has that face, TW. I can't lie about that, but that it is what it is. So that feud festers into All Japan Wrestling Reflection Nights. But the promoters like Stu Hart, the promoters like Baba in All Japan Wrestling sees the chemistry that these two guys have together, and they form the tag team of the British Bulldogs. So when they come back to Stampede Wrestling, TW, they are the Stampede. I think it was the North American Tag Team Champions, but that's, it is what it is. But they get their cred of winning titles, tag team titles, in not only in Japan, because they were, I think, junior heavyweight tag team champions over there too, but they were also Stampede Wrestling North American Tag Team Champions. Now here's where it gets to the history that you and I know very fluidly. That's when Vince McMahon, in his mission to control the world of professional wrestling, buys out Stu Hart, buys out the territory of Stampede Wrestling, the controlling interest of Stampede Wrestling, if you will. So you call it a talent. Some people call it a talent raid. Others call it a talent acquisition. And guess what? 4 people were part of that talent acquisition. Bret Hart, Jim Neidhart, Davey Boy, and Dynamite Kid. Those were 4 of the biggest acquisitions of Vince McMahon, and they brought them to the WWF. And the first feud for the British Bulldogs were against the Hart Foundation because they knew each other from Stampede days. Bret Hart, he was one of the top singles guys in Stampede Wrestling. He fought the Dynamite Kid one-on-one. He fought Davey Boy Smith one-on-one. So what do you do, TW? Since all of them have this history with each other, why not put them all together? And then the first match, I want to talk about that match first. Let's talk about that feud first, because that put both teams on the map, not only in the WWF, but in the Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazines, the Inside Wrestling magazines, the Aftermax, all that stuff. You recognize these two tag teams before the not before, but not only was it the Rock and Roll Express versus the Midnight Express as one of the hot feuds, the hot blood feuds in Southern wrestling, but for the New York audience, the Northeast audience, TW, the first hot feud in tag team wrestling for them was the Hart Foundation and the British Bulldogs. So what say you about those 4? Because I gave you a match to watch from the infamous world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden, in 1985.
3 of those dudes were banging one of those dudes' sisters. So that must have been some nice heat in the match there.
You mean Diana Hart ran a train? They ran a train?
No. Davey Boy was married to one, Neidhart's married to one, and Dynamite was married to one.
Oh, I thought you meant they ran a train on one of the Hart sisters. Jesus Christ. I don't
know. No. They all had a Hart sister, and they were all telling Brett.
I got that.
Brett probably met Benoit and went, "You too? You're going to bang one of my sisters too, or one of my brothers?"
Jesus Christ. So let's talk about the match.
Do you know when Bret first got there, they tried making him Cowboy Bret Hart because he was from Calgary, and they were going to make him a cowboy, and it only lasted like a week or 2. So the best thing that ever happened to those 4 guys was also the best thing that ever happened to tag team wrestling, because it starts with those 4 and it grows from there. I mean, you might have had already the Sheik and Volkov and the US Express and the Dream Team, but they were all that old school, damn near Southern wrestling style. Wyndham was a little bit more athletic, but it was that throwback style. And then you get these 4 guys out there just stealing shows every night, right? And at one point, for a couple years, one of these two teams were tag team champions because that would be the main event in the B towns and people would pay to come see it. So familiarity breeds whatever the term is. Good results in this case. These guys knowing each other
sometimes too.
Huh?
Familiarity breeds content. That's what the old saying goes.
Contempt,
yeah.
Not content. Contempt, right? And so the cool thing about both of these tag teams is they both went on to have singles careers, and no one ever turned on the other one. They just went their separate ways, reunited sometimes. Well, you tell me the Bulldogs turned on each other and was.
I'll get to that a little bit later.
But
it
didn't happen on TV, so it didn't happen for my TV.
I'll get to that a little bit later, but let's just talk about the Hearts and the Bulldogs because, again, that match, again, like you said, not only stole the show, but the fluidity, the chemistry. Again, they mirrored each other because Bret Hart and Dynamite Kid, they were the athletic, technical guys. Jim Neidhart, Davey Boy Smith, they were the bruisers, they were the muscle, they were all that stuff. But when Davey Boy wrestled Bret Hart, he kept up with him. When Neidhart wrestled with Dynamite Kid, Neidhart kept up with him and his speed and all that stuff. That's what made that match from Madison Square Garden so unique. That's what made, again, like you said, New York took notice, but the world took notice because Vince McMahon gave them the platform. Because, again, with Hulkamania doing what it's doing for the mainstream audience, everybody who's looking at WWF is like, wait a minute, what else is there on the undercard? That match was right there. That match was very noticeable. And you even said, at 1984-85, that tag team division was pretty good. I'm not going to say stacked, but pretty good. Volkov and Sheik, the Dream Team, the U.S. Express. A couple of months before that, you had Adrian Adonis and Dick Murdoch. You might have had Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas a little bit. So, and you bring those two teams in there.
Were Rick Martel and Tony Garea still going down?
No, that was early 80s. They weren't there after that. But you get where I'm going with that.
Samoans. You had the Samoans.
Yeah.
Alpha and Sika were there around then.
Yeah, so you had a pretty deep roster. So what say you about this match before we get moving
Killer
on?
Bees. How we forget about the Killer Bees?
You can't forget about
it. It was great, and it had an awesome finish, which made me realize, it's funny, like, in life, when you like somebody, you forgive a lot of things. It's very prevalent in politics, where you're pointing fingers at the other side while looking right past your own guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
These guys, at the way this match ends, they did a super heart attack, and while they were clearing Bret out of the ring, Dynamite cheated, Hulk Hogan style, and the Bulldogs beat the Hart Foundations because of the cheating. The illegal man got the victory.
You know what's funny about that? And I forget who did the commentary, but if it was always Gorilla and Jesse,
it was Bobby.
In 84, but you get where I'm going with this.
He said that illegal man is in the ring.
Right. It's funny because Gorilla excused the cheating because Dynamite did it, but then either Jesse or Bobby the Brain Heenan notices the cheating, and it's not fair. It's unfair. It's unlawful. It should be stricken from the record.
It reminded me of Hogan with the back rakes and the eye gouges and the punches. That's what they were doing the whole time, and then they basically cheated to win, which is fine because I'm sure there was a storyline built up before that where the Hart Foundation always cheated, and then they basically beat them at their own game. That's the whole point, is the good guys triumph over evil because they got to take a page out of their book. But it was a beautiful finish.
The only sad thing I would disagree with, TW, because, again, the formula is very, very different in WWF scales because, again, sometimes the house shows did not, amplify itself on TV, especially this one here in 85 because maybe they might have fought once on Superstars, but that's it. But it didn't really mean nothing. This feud was really, I would say, in my humble opinion, and they fought each other at Reflection Nights again, WrestleMania 3 and all that stuff, but we're not talking about that. The 87 feud was more amplified on TV with the storylines and the Saturday Night's Main Event and the WrestleMania 3 and all that stuff. But in 85, I would dare to say this was one of the top house show feuds because it didn't matter with the win-loss record on TV because it almost like it never happened. But if you was privileged enough to go to Madison Square Garden, if you was privileged enough to go to the Boston Garden, if you was privileged enough to go to the Baltimore Arena or the LA Sports Arena, or you
Joe
Louis Arena, if you was privileged enough to get a Hearts and Bulldogs match, you got your money's worth. You agree with that assessment?
Absolutely. And it's not a coincidence that they're doing the undercard in 85, 84, and in 86, 87, they're the headliners. They are the main event at a show that Hogan's not on, the B show. And then I also got to see them wrestle each other. They were the semi-main event, they called it. It would be the match after intermission, and then it would be a girl match or a midget match or some other match, and then it would be Hogan versus Orndorff or Hogan versus Macho or Hogan versus Morocco. It was good time to be a wrestling fan, man. And I still tell people to this day, wrestlers will tell you this. I can tell you this as a fan now that I've been to a lot of the TV shows. A house show is a better show to go see than a show that's on TV because of the commercials and the stops and the starts and all that. A house show starts at 7. It's over by 9:30. There's an intermission. There's merchandise. There's popcorn. The matches are longer. They're more competitive. It's not a squash. While this match, I know what you're talking about with your tangent. Don't get me wrong. But while this was a house show, this was on MSG Network. This was on cable. So if you got it on MSG Network or if you got it on the Joe Louis, I don't know what the Detroit Sports Network is at that time, but you knew what? PASS, Pro-Am Sports Network system.
Pro-Am Sports Network. If you got a Bulldogs Hearts match on that, the history counts for y'all, but it never counted for the whole.
But there's a difference. It was filmed and then put on TV. It wasn't a TV show being recorded.
But you're getting this match, and then it's going to go on Coliseum home video. Right. But it's still a good ass match. With that being said,
absolutely.
But let's move on a little bit because again, what these house show matches was doing, Reflection Nights, they were not only was the Hart Foundation getting street cred, but the Bulldogs were getting street cred, and of course, Vince McMahon and Pat Patterson and the people behind the scenes are noticing the pops that the British Bulldogs are getting. Again, remember TW that one of the best moves. Tag team moves was when Davey Boy presses Dynamite over his head and flings him to the guy on the floor with a flying headbutt. That shit was awesome. I love that. I love Davey Boy's, running power slam, the British Stampede, you could call it. Whatever, some people call it Oklahoma Stampede, but again, he's not from
Calgary Stampede.
Well, he wasn't from Calgary either, but
he came there.
He did, but they just called it the power slam. But again, neither here nor there. But British Bulldogs were gaining their street cred, and on TV, they had aspirations to become the WWF Tag Team Champions. And this program lasted for fucking at least 9 months, from let's say the summer of 85 TW to April of 86. And that was the program that they had with the Dream Team. So TW, the history of this feud is so great, but it feels like it's Vince McMahon took something from Vern Gagne because there was a formula that Vern Gagne did that kind of frustrated a lot of people, but still got people to pay the money. And I don't remember like Vince McMahon doing this a lot, but this feud kind of reminds me of the AWA formula where the challengers are chasing the champions for so many months. They get so close to becoming the new champions, but then they just come up just a little bit short. So let's say because that's an AWA formula. That's kind of like an NWA formula. Vince doesn't like to do that formula of chasing for months, especially if especially on the good guy scale, because in the 80s, Vince McMahon always loved to give the audience the happy ending and the big payoff where the heroes come out, like you always say, they come out 90% of the time. But this was the most like gut-wrenching chase that you wanted to see the British Bulldogs become the World Tag Team Champions. And one of the matches I gave you was a non-title match, but it just proved the point that the British Bulldogs, had to go through these hurdles. They not only had to compete in non-title matches, but the Dream Team managed by Johnny Valiant set all the rules and the parameters. So what say you about this feud between the Bulldogs and the Dream Team of Valentine and Beefcake?
They did this. They did it with the IC title a lot too, where Hogan was the babyface. He was the one holding the reins with the world title because Hogan Vince thought a winning champion drew.
Mm-hmm.
The tag team, it was such a chase that it was so satisfying that when your guys won, you were happy. But then where do you go from there, right? Sounds like then they got to get screwed out of the belts, so they're chasing them again, right? The money's in the chase. But at the end of the day, it worked. It's still one of my favorite runs ever. Hogan winning the world title from the Sheik was like, boom, it was instant. It was like he won in December, Hogan won in January. So it was the transition champion. It was paper champion, all that. There wasn't a real, but I guess you tie in the Bob Backlund part and the Sheik robbing him and Hogan come to save the day, whatever. But it was redemption. But the tag team chase, it just there was always something that they got. Oh, you won the 2 falls, but the first one was a count out. They can't lose the belts because of the count. Well, then they should have stopped the match right there. If they can't win the belts if they win the second fall. What's the point? And I want to say after that, it got to the point where as long as the final fall wasn't a count out or disqualification, the champion still lost. Like either NWA did that or AWA did that, like in response to that. It could be just me thinking it was a good idea, but I'm pretty sure that happened somewhere after that.
Could be you, but go ahead.
Remember, I don't know if you remember that far back. You're only like 4, but remember how pissed you were when the Bulldogs won, and you were ecstatic, and because they pinned them in the second fall, and they're like, oh. But because they won 1 fall by count out, they do not win the titles. And it's like, oh, you're so mad. And then obviously it set up WrestleMania 2 so it was all for good. But the chase, to me, it's the thrill of the chase. It's a beautiful thing. I don't think you have every belt be that way. Because right now,
Vince McMahon did not do this formula of the AWA and the NWA. So this was he was following that formula.
He did it with Macho Man because people were chasing his ass and Honky Tonk Man.
Nah, but again, the person chasing those guys didn't get the payoff.
All right,
this is the chase.
Right, Warrior ended Honky Tonk Man.
Right, that's why I said that's why I have to push back because again, AWA and NWA did the chase to get to the payoff, but sometimes they got greedy with the chase so much that they were like, I don't need you to be the champion because I'm not going to make money after you win. Right. This was Vince following that formula, but he set the date to finally get the payoff at the right place at the right time. Rosemont Horizon, April of 1986, Reflection Nights, WrestleMania 2, and the variables were there.
And they were the main event of that building too, weren't they?
They probably were. I think they were. Again,
Hogan was in LA.
I didn't see it live. So again, we did not know how they were doing these matches and placements. So yeah, that was the top billing of the Rosemont Horizon between the Bulldogs and the Dream Team. And again, when the start of it happened, before that, the start of the feud, the Bulldogs were alone. They weren't managed by Captain Lou Albano. During the chase, they incorporated or they recruited Captain Lou Albano, or Captain Lou, I think, came in saying, I can help you get to that spot. I can help you get to that promised land, Daddy-O, and all that stuff. And they took it on a manager. And then by the time they got to Rosemont Horizon, then you got the star power of Ozzy Osbourne and all that stuff. So what's ATW about the whole mesh coming to WrestleMania 2? And let's be honest, I don't know if that match equals the stuff we saw on Superstars. I don't know if that match at WrestleMania 2 equals to the stuff on Saturday night's main event, like you said, with the 2 out of 3 fall stuff. Those were better matches in the ring. This was more the payoff, and the memory is what you would call it. I think it was Davey Boy taking Valentine's head into Dynamite, who put his head out. He leaned over and he collapsed backwards. That was like, it's kind of, they cheated again. They cheated to win, but that finish is still memorable. But I don't think the match, to me, and this is maybe I'm just looking at it differently. That match wouldn't be a Meltzer 5-star in comparison to the stuff before.
Well, it wouldn't be anyway because it's WWE. But anyway,
but besides that. But you get where I'm going with that match. Doesn't equate to the others.
Isn't the match? The memory is that they won and that Ozzy was there, and it was the. I remember I was eating a Hostess chocolate cream pie when they first came out. It was a pie dipped in chocolate and pudding, pudding pie. That's what, not cream pie. That sounded gross. It was a Hostess pudding pie, and it was glorious.
It
was great.
it sounded other stuff, but go ahead. Sounded like a T-Bolt Robert Parker pick that, and you was eating a Hostess cupcake with it.
I had just got into wrestling, and that was the first thing that hooked me once I started watching were the Bulldogs. And so that 82 WrestleMania 2, them winning it, that's what probably sank their teeth into me and made me. My first show ever that I ever watched was the one where I want to say Morocco hung Ricky Steamboat over the top rope with a belt, and Big John Studd cut Andre the Giant's hair. That was one episode of Superstars. That's the first one I ever watched. Week later, I saw Tito off to the races, and then the Bulldogs. And something about tag teams, I think younger kids like it, especially if you like sports, right? You see two. That's why I'm a stickler where they got a match. And Beefcake and Valentine did not match. It was gross miscarriage of justice for them to be champions. But it was just
thing I want to say about this, because again, this is why I say that this match doesn't live up to the hype, and it's because I don't mind the ending, but I think, first of all, I think the match was short. It just felt short to me for all that stuff. Again, in comparison to the 2 out of 3 falls that you was talking about, in comparison to all that stuff, I think we got cheated out of it. Again, you're right. The payoff nullified everything that I might be nitpicky about. And again, the one thing I loved about the match was that the outside referee hooked Brutus Beefcake's leg to prevent him from saving Valentine from getting the pin. That was the funniest shit, too. If people
was it him or Ozzy that did it?
No, it was the referee. It was the outside second referee that stopped Brutus Beefcake from saving his partner.
I'll bet it's because Ozzy wasn't in his. He missed his cue.
Probably because he was coked up or whatever the case may be. But that referee,
Wuhan virus.
That referee, that is so memorable in my eyes. But that's great. But again, the match felt short to me. Again, that's why I say the other matches are so better.
Well, the match you had me watch was like a 5.5 minute Bulldog squash. It was
but that was the start of the parameters of the chase, because you had to start somewhere, and that started at Superstars.
That was an awesome finish. That one was. Do you remember the finish of that one?
Nah, because I'm thinking more about WrestleMania 2. Go ahead.
So Bulldog did the power slam to Beefcake.
Oh, Beefcake.
No, he did the Beefcake, and he was gonna pin him. But Valentine came running in, and so Bulldog, instead of pinning him, hooked him up into an airplane spin, walked over and tagged Dynamite, who then jumped off the top rope onto the back of Valentine and then headbutted Beefcake and got the win, which is how they won the fall on the Saturday Night's Main Event. I'm pretty sure that's the exact same finish. He jumped off of Bulldog, had Valentine up there, and he hit that headbutt and got the win, and everyone went crazy, but no.
Just like you said, that they were ahead of their time with the tag team fluidity, the moves that they did together, and that's another example of Reflection Nights of how ahead of the time, very technically sound that the British Bulldogs were. Again, the Rockers and the Rock and Roll Express and the Fantaxes get more credit, but I think that British Bulldogs are sneaky good.
They were pretty, man. They were pretty. Yeah. It was art. And and the funny thing is look at Valentine and Beefcake, look at Wyndham and Rotunda, look at Volkov and Sheik. Most of the tag team wrestlers, the double teams would be a double suplex or a double clothesline or a double atomic drop if they were baby faces, right? Nobody was doing holding a guy while the other guy jumps off this guy's back and do that until the Bulldogs. And because originally tag team wrestling they just put two guys together that they didn't have anything for. Here, Stan Hansen and DiBiase, go tag team. And then some guys take it serious and like, hey, let's make a go of this. And they become successful. And other guys, like Orton and Morocco, did you ever really think of them as a tag team? I always thought of them as two singles guys teaming up. And they had my career.
It worked. So
but they chased for the belts, and they cost the Bulldogs the belts on, they didn't cost them. They hurt them in a house show. And remember, I'll never forget it. That was the day Hogan got the necklace ripped off by Andre. Davey Boy had to carry Dynamite to the ring because he couldn't walk. And then he got hit with the megaphone.
I think you're getting a couple of dates mixed up. But I will correct you on this, because after their win in April of 1986 Reflection Nights of course, the celebration started. And again, they had some great tag team title defenses, Reflection. That's against Volkov and Sheik, Stud and Bundy. They should have been tag team champions, but they didn't pull the trigger on that. And of course, they had their rematches with the Dream Team on the house show circuit. But in Toronto, in late, I believe it was November of 1986, TW, in the house show against Orton and Morocco, or it could have been against the Dream Team in a rematch. Can't remember the hyperboles, but there was a botch spot where Dynamite Kid was doing his 70-mile-an-hour run off the ropes, but he got whiplash on the top rope, and of course he fucked up his back real bad. He actually was on
Morocco. Orton put a chair there, and he hit the chair right on the disc.
But he was going 70 miles an hour, so it caught him bad, and then he was on the floor, and of course, they didn't do the X's back then, but it was just one of those biggest fuck ups. But unfortunately, there was Vince McMahon had to get the belts off the Bulldogs. So what you're saying happened in January of 1987, where and Vince McMahon, you got to give him a little bit of credit, but again, he's a little bit vindictive and evil here because this man should not have been on TV. This man should have been mending. He should have been in home bed. So this is one of those examples of Vince McMahon being an evil person that has no feeling and no heart. So I'll give people that thing. But they booked the Bulldogs to do this in 1987, but Vince McMahon did the best he could by writing Dynamite Kid out, where Jimmy Hart put the megaphone to his head, knocked him out cold. So this way, Davey Boy Smith would fight the Hart Foundation 2-on-1
with the crooked ref.
With the crooked ref, Danny Davis, and all that hyperbole resulted in new tag team champions in January of 1987, and it was on Superstars. So, I was pissed off when I saw the British Bulldogs lose the tag team titles in that fashion with the crooked referee and all the hyperboles, but it needed to be done so this way Dynamite Kid can mend his injuries. So what say you, TW, about that memory right there? Because one of the most infamous memories of syndicated wrestling TV for WWF standards.
I was angry. I'm like, that's not fair. He got hit with a megaphone. I didn't know about the back injury until a week later in like a magazine. And someone exposed it, how Davey Boy had to piggyback in the ring. But that was the same day that Andre ripped the cross off of Hogan's neck on the Piper's Pit in January of 87. Those two things happened on the same episode. I call it Black Sunday because it crushed me. It might have been Saturday, but it crushed me. Hogan got turned down by Andre. Bulldogs got hurt by the megaphone and lost the belts on TV when nobody ever lost the damn belts on TV. And it was probably the moment where I told my mom, I have to go to WrestleMania. And I went to WrestleMania 3 because of that day.
Because of that situation and that Black Sunday or Saturday.
Well, that's right around the time they probably announced it was coming to Detroit. They were setting up the Hogan Andre.
But you see that example of Reflection that TW gave you? Look at the investment. Look at even his voice kind of cringed because he remembered that. That's like a childhood trauma right there. We don't have that in our 40s, TW, in your 50s per se, but we don't have those traumas
50.
of.
Slow down. 50. I'm not in my 50s.
We don't know the exact. I could be actually 49 right now. We don't know the calendar is not accurate. There's no such thing as leap years. There's no such thing as, daylight savings time. So we could be older, but again, that's hyperbole. But anyway, the childhood trauma that TW exposed just is an example of how great pro wrestling was back in the good old days of the 80s. And of course, we don't have to get into the WrestleMania 3 because then there'll be a 5-hour show. But during that time span where he was mending his injuries and then they come up short in the house show circuit against the Hart Foundation, TW, they implemented a mascot. I think now this is where we could look at it 2 ways, TW. I want your opinion on this because this is the way I looked at it. We're getting into 1987, and you could see the difference between the British Bulldogs of 1985 to the British Bulldogs of 1987. Davey Boy is jacked to the moon, and he's, you could say he's as healthy as a horse. But Dynamite Kid does not look the same as he did in 1985. So I think Vince McMahon is seeing maybe not the waning days of the British Bulldogs, but he doesn't see the same value like he sees in the Hart Foundation. He doesn't see the same value as the Killer Bees or the Strike Forces by the time it's 1987. So now Vince McMahon has got to put a distraction in your face. And that distraction is a Bulldog mascot named Matilda. So what say you, TW, about that assessment? Do you agree or you have a different take on that?
Absolutely. He saw the breakdown of Dynamite's body. And you're talking, by the time they added Matilda, you already had Frankie and you had Damien. So that's when the term circus got thrown around with in regards to New York as a circus, Atlanta's a wrestling show. But
did you like Matilda, or did you think it was? Did you like Matilda, or did you like the mascots, or did you think it was?
As a kid, but as a wrestler, as an adult, it's like, that's work. Like, I guarantee you, they didn't like having to bring that dog to the ring. And there was someone that followed behind him. I remember reading this story. I remember where I read it, but that dog would just shit while it walked. And it was multiple versions of Matilda. There was a second one that was obviously not Matilda, and they said it was the cousin.
The second dog was Winston. The first one was Matilda. But I don't mind Damien, but every other animal I just did not care for. So
it's animal abuse. Like, why do you bring a dog? Dogs have sensitive hearing. You bring it into a 1987 Pontiac Silverdome. I don't know why I said 1987. I meant to say 92,000 people in a Silverdome. Yeah, it'd be loud as fuck. And that dog's probably scared shitless. And then the same thing with the bird. The bird's probably like, what the fuck? Why am I here?
But the dog was neutered, I think, because he didn't react to anything. He was actually very...
You can be neutered, but you're still going to hurt your ears. You don't snip the ears.
Bob Barker made sure you say you spayed and neutered your dogs. So Bob Barker looked at that dog.
That dog would walk to the ring and shit, and someone was going behind him in case that dog
did you see the shit? Did you see it?
I think that's why they probably got rid of Matilda and got Winston, because of the damn poop.
And Matilda was one of the reasons for a British Bulldogs feud with the Islanders of Haku and Kama.
Him, right?
Yeah, no, Bobby the Brain Heenan kidnapped Matilda. So, that's how it started with one of those programs. But again, we're not talking about every match Reflection is. But, again, it might be the waning days of the British Bulldogs TW, but they're still good chasers. So one of the matches I got you to watch was the British Bulldogs chasing the World Tag Team Championships, and the current champions of 1988 at that time was Axe and Smash Demolition. So, what say you about that match? Because again, you can see the difference of the British Bulldogs from 1985 to 1988. Did you see any differences? Did you see them trying to hold on to what they were doing in 85? Because again, Dynamite Kid, he's stubborn with his ways. The mind is strong, but the body just doesn't follow. What say you?
It became more heavy on Davey Boy, and also they were slower. Dynamite wasn't the same. I still think he came out the top rope, but I don't know if he did that headbutt no more, because that's probably how he jacked his back up. Besides I noticed. So it was funny because the match with the Rock and Roll Express, my memory was that the Bulldogs had the beards, but it was actually Ricky Morton had a beard in that match. But there was a time where the Bulldogs had beards when they were wrestling, and I think they were in Continental or something. The magazines
back in Stampede.
Oh, 87, 80, 89, or whatever.
Wait, who are you talking about?
They did
Bulldogs?
that. The Bulldogs. The show they
Stampede
did with the Rock
in 89. But let's go back to let's just talk about Demolition. I'll give you the histrionics.
Yeah. They were slower. They were bigger too. So I would assume Dynamite went on some more gimmicks to make his back stronger, so that it would heal quicker, if you will. But they were different. They weren't. They looked older too.
Right, but do you think because of the back injury that happened in 86, he didn't... Remember how we always talk about out of sight, out of mind? Maybe the doctors told him take 9 months off, right? You couldn't take 9 months off in the 80s because that's a lot of money on the table.
And it wasn't guaranteed money, right? Yeah.
Right, and it wasn't guaranteed money. So he probably had to, speed up the pace with the painkillers, the pills, the steroids, and all that stuff to make a 9-month recovery timeline to maybe a 2-month timeline. That's still a lot of time of checks you're missing, but he made that conscious decision on his own, but he had no choice because, like you said, it's not guaranteed money. So it is what it is, Reflection. I just wanted to give that hyperbole there. But
I've never watched WrestleMania 3 on video. I was there, and they were this big, but I'm gonna assume Dynamite didn't wrestle a lot in that match. That's why Tito was there.
He had some spots,
right.
but it was very, very few and far between. I get you
Right.
that. But
I
it
remember
is what
Tito
it is.
getting a lot of heat, and so he got hurt in like the end of December with that chair. The belts were like mid-January when he just came out and got bonked with the megaphone. So you're talking December to April, like, and I'm sure that wasn't his first match back. He probably did a couple house shows to get some rust off.
Right.
So he definitely got fast-tracked back. And the neck, the back, those aren't things you want to mess with. You can wrestle with a limp. You can't wrestle with paralysis.
Right. So Reflectionites, they got fired after Survivor Series of 1988. So again, it depends on who.
For the shit with the Rojos?
Yes, it depends on who you talk to. It depends if you talk to Jacques, you talk to Raymond, or you talk to actually Davey Boy. So, but I guess 2-1 means majority rules, so I have to go with the Rujos. But as people say, Dynamite Kid was a prick backstage. Yeah. Dynamite Kid liked to rib a lot, but not rib in the sense of everybody laughs. I think he just laughed at his own jokes, and Jacques took the brunt.
He was a bully.
Yeah, he was a bully. So Jacques took the brunt of all his ribs, which weren't funny, but it was just being a bully. But lo and behold, nobody knew how tough and a badass Raymond is. He's the older brother, so he is what he is. So one time after Survivor Series, I don't know, at a house show, Raymond beat the shit out of Dynamite Kid, and everybody
saw. He beat the shit out of him. He hit him one time with a roll of quarters.
That still counts as beating the shit out of him.
Knocked him clean out. Yep.
Knocked him
and
the fuck out.
Boy knew it was coming.
Yeah. So it knocked them the fuck out. It looked like a receipt. But after all that stuff, and I think Dynamite Kid actually complained to either Vince or Pat Patterson. I'm not too sure about the story, TW, but I guess Vince McMahon couldn't take it no more. Or, like I said, Vince McMahon just didn't see the value in the British Bulldogs anymore because, again, after the 4 years, they didn't look, well, Dynamite Kid did not look like the way he did in 1985. So it was collateral damage to let both of them go. So with that being said, Reflectionites, of course, they would do the independent scenes, whatever territories were left. They still had, name recognition TW in All Japan and New Japan Wrestling, respectively. But Vern Gagne, in one of his desperate attempts to get something done, saw a golden opportunity to get a dream match going. And in January of 1989, it was the Forbidden Door. It was one of the first Forbidden Door matches you can ever have. One of the first dream matches that if you read the aftermaths, you was thinking, what would have happened? Now, technically, some dream matches already happened in the histrionics. I mean, the U.S. Express did fight the Fabulous Ones, but was it really a dream match? Not with the pedigrees, I guess, in my humble opinion. That's just me. But you got former WWF Tag Team Champions against former NWA World Tag Team Champions. The prestige of both belts being at its hierarchy, and the worlds collide in 1989 in Kansas City, Missouri. What say you about this 30-minute draw? I mean, again, I think Dynamite Kid wanted to prove to Vince McMahon that he still got it. I think for this purpose, maybe he got some time off, or maybe he took some time. But with the WWF, you was working like 10 days out of the week. So right now he got to at least, rest his body a little bit. This match was good.
You know what though? When you wrestle more, you hurt less, unless you're injured.
Okay. When
you wrestle once a month or once every couple months, this shit hurts.
Or maybe once a week. You got to give it that.
Right, but it hurts. It basically, every bump you take, it's basically, especially like what I was watching the match, things that were going through my head were like, I wonder what's going through their mind when they're used to wrestling in front of 15,000 people. Now there's like 300. And you're just like, because I know I'm guilty of it. I wasn't when I was young and I was full of piss and vinegar. I wrestled the same in front of 10 people as I did in front of a couple hundred. Because I was taught that, like, hey, man, 10 people paid to see you wrestle. You give them what you came to give them, right? And hopefully those 10 people go tell 10 more people, and next month there's 20. But if you out there and lay an egg, then they're not going to tell it. They're going to tell everybody, it sucked. Nobody was there. But if you steal the show, if you will, then people are coming back with those guys. And I was watching them. Part of me felt bad. Part of me thought, which you got to have a bad reputation that they never went to WCW. That like NWA would happily have taken them if it made money.
You mean the Bulldogs?
Yeah.
Well, like, they were financially strapped, so they couldn't afford them. They wanted them, but they couldn't afford them.
You're telling me an indie show could afford them and WCW couldn't?
No, but again, remember the WCW management was, it was topsy-turvy because it was going from Jim Crockett to Ted Turner, so they couldn't. Right. A lot of people left because of the mismanagement there. So It is what it is.
I understand that, but I still think wrestling's still a community, and even though there are guys in Atlanta and guys in New York, they're still friends. Right. And I'm telling you, he got blackballed because it blew my mind to see them versus Rock and Roll Express, and it wasn't WCW. That's crazy to me. And that's when WCW was having heat with the Ricky Morton. They were having I think Ricky and Dusty got into it or whatever the hell their problem was, because he still thinks to this day Dusty held them back.
And money, of course, everything's always comes back to money. But what say you about this match? Because this match was a dream match per se. That's what it was big.
And I like that the Bulldogs. It started off scientific. You're in a building where most people are going to cheer for both of you. Maybe in the South, they're going to probably boo the Bulldogs if they had to boo somebody. But they took it out of the fans' hands to turn on them, and they wrestled heel. Davey Boy moved out of the way. Robert hit the post, and then from there, him and Dynamite just ate him up, and then it went to a draw. The end was kind of fucked. They kept.
Well, it ended in a draw. It ended in a draw.
So, but I know, but they were trying to do the end where 1-2, and then, but they ended up kicking out. Davey Boy kicked out of the double drop kick on 1. I thought that was kind of shitty. It's bad enough you're kicking out of their finish that won them 4 World Tag Team titles, but you're kicking out on 1. And
hey man, just so people know, it's not in the 2000s that people were kicking out at 1. It started in the 80s, and Davey Boy Smith did it first. So you got to start somewhere, TW. So we saw it.
I'm gonna do the Davey Boy spot. What's that? Where I kick out of your finish on 1. Whatever your finish is, I don't care. But it was a good match, and it was technical, and then it was double team these guys, double team those guys. I don't think they ever did a rematch. So that's where. If this would have happened in WCW or WWF, there would have been a winner. But this is the equivalent of that Super Show where AWA World Champion Rick Martel fought NWA World Champion Ric Flair, and they each won a fall, and then it was a draw at the end, which is actually pretty cool that they each got a fall, because neither one wants to be the guy that loses the first fall, right? Because then you can say, well, see, I beat him if it was a regular match. But
so you think it would have been better if this was like a 2 out of 3 fall 30-minute match where one got a fall, the other got a fall, and then it just ended in a draw?
I think it would have been better in WCW or WWE because one of them would have won.
Oh, okay.
30-minute matches are dumb.
Well, in WCW and WWE would have been more visible and more people would have known about it. So that's one thing. So I think this match.
I don't just mean that. I mean, someone would have said, you're going over and you're putting them over, and that's that. But because they both negotiated their own shit there, they're like, I'm not jobbing. All right, we'll do a Broadway. But they probably hope to do a Broadway to come back and have another match. But Dynamite Kid wasn't long for the world of wrestling after around that time. I don't know when he actually stopped, but I would doubt it was early 90.
93.
He went till 93?
Well, not by choice. He had no. Was
he in Calgary till 93?
No, in Japan. But I'll give you the logistics. Kamate, tranquilo. I'll give you all that stuff. So, in essence, TW and the Reflectionites after '88, they were touring. They did their indie stuff, but they primarily stayed in the rebooted Stampede Wrestling of Bruce Hart and stuff like that, and All Japan, New Japan. So they went back and forth, winning tag team titles in Japan. And in 1989. You said that they never broke up. They actually did. But before they broke up, they had a brutal feud against Karuchi Vice. And I gave you one match from Stampede Wrestling. It was the British Bulldogs and a young upstart, Flying Brian, but he wasn't called Flying Brian, but it was a 6-man tag between the British Bulldogs and Brian Pillman against Karuchi Vice, because that was one of the hot feuds in Stampede Wrestling right there. The British Bulldogs against some guy named Bob Brown, who's kind of like toiling. He was doing double duty as a commentator and / manager and all that. So he was trying to be a Bobby Heenan. So what say you about this 6-man match? Because what I wanted to give you was not only seeing Flying Brian, but also another young upstart in Chris Benoit at the end. But I just wanted you to see like the past meeting the future in that kind of.
It was cool because I didn't know that they crossed paths. Mm-hmm. I knew that Benoit was a fan of Dynamites. I would have assumed he met him, but I didn't know they were in Calgary at the same time. And the match after it that came on its own was the follow-up to that, and it was Benoit teaming with Bulldog and I think Pillman, and it was 4 against 4 because Larry Cameron somehow got involved in there.
Yeah, it turned into an 8-man.
Lots of dead guys in these matches. You got Stu Hart at ringside talking. You got Bronco LeGurk or whatever refereeing. You got a dead Pillman, a dead Bulldog, and a dead Dynamite. And
Jesus Christ! Now you're getting.
Booker's dead. Bastion Booker's in that match. He's dead too. I'm sure. Well, the referee was Bronco Lubick or whatever. Not Bronco Lubick. That's Global. Bronco LeGurk. I don't know. Some old NWA or AWA world champion. Bob Roop. Bob Stoop. Somebody. Not Bob Roop. Bob.
You're getting stuck on names. I just want you. I know you're saying they're all dead, but you're getting stuck on names. I just want you to talk about the matches.
Who was the referee? Damn it, the referee was
Pat O'Connor. It's not about O'Connor. It's not about
Pat O'Connor.
I don't care. It's
I got a question for you.
Okay.
How come Queen Aussie is not on WWE or AEW?
Queen Aussie?
The chick from WoW. I've been watching WoW ever since we did the shit.
Ask Michael Davis on that one.
She's hot. She can work. And she's younger. I don't get why she's there.
Because probably
McClain's got Polaroids, I think.
Well, if Queen Aussie is this good, then she will be in AEW in no time.
Well, she's probably holding out for NXT. NXT's got like 50 women, dude. It's nuts. But go ahead.
That's why, again, the
match was a fucking clusterfuck is what the match was. Talk about other things, because this match was not a good one. The thing that got me excited was I didn't read it right. I thought it was Davey Boy and Dynamite versus Pillman and Cavaricci. I thought it was a Japanese guy, so I thought it was in Japan, and it was Pillman and a Japanese guy versus the Bulldogs. And then when I saw they were teaming, and then I saw the 3 jobbers they were in there against,
not jobbers. It's Carucci. It was Carucci Vice. They're not jobbers. Yeah. They were the top heels.
Vulcan Singh, and Bob Roop.
Yeah. So that doesn't mean they're jobbers. That just means that
they look like jobbers. You got 3 stars on one side. See, and 3 dudes that look like they just punched out at the factory.
See, you're looking through the tunnel vision of WWE and the tunnel vision of WCW that you only respect those A-listers. This is like the minor leagues. Yes, the British Bulldogs went back to the minor leagues of Stampede Wrestling, but you got to go to AAA. Sometimes you got to work on your craft a little bit so you can get called up again. So you said that you said that the Bulldogs never betrayed each other. I actually will prove you wrong, but I didn't show you the video footage. They broke up in Stampede Wrestling Reflection Nights because Dynamite Smith was having a program with Davey Boy's cousin, Johnny Smith. But then in one of those instances, TW, there was a spot where Johnny Smith took out Dynamite Kid, but Dynamite Kid did not see who did it. Johnny Smith accused Davey Boy of doing it, and Dynamite Kid believed Johnny and never believed Davey Boy.
Now.
So in essence, now in the locker rooms, Reflection Nights, Bob Brown, the guy that I'm talking about, that's a wannabe Canadian Bobby the Brain Heenan, instigates and antagonizes Dynamite Kid. He keeps goading him that Davey Boy Smith is the cause of all this. Davey Boy wants to beat the shit out of Bob Brown, but Dynamite Kid does not want to hear from Davey Boy Smith. Guess who comes in to interfere? Johnny Smith. And Johnny Smith and Dynamite Kid beat the shit out of Davey Boy Smith in the locker rooms. So TW, in histrionics, the British Bulldogs did break up. So what say you about that?
I remember this now. And then they start calling themselves the new Bulldogs or something. Johnny Smith and Dynamite. They called themselves something.
Well, legalities kind of changed that. And the reason is Davey Boy was actually smart and shrewd. He bought the trademark and IP rights to the name British Bulldog. So he owned it. Dynamite felt cheated. So in Japan and in Canada Stampede Wrestling, he teamed up with Johnny Smith, and he had to rename their tag team the British Bruisers.
Bruisers, yes.
So
yes.
with that being said, TW, it's kind of a shady thing to do, but I don't fault Davey Boy Smith for being business acumen. If I own the IP rights, if I own the trademark, or I bought the trademark, I can't blame him for doing that. But with the history that you have from starting from, let's say, 1983 to, let's say, 1990 TW, and you snake me out of the name, I might not want to talk to you ever again. So what say you, TW, about it's kind of shady shit. So what say you?
Well,
because you're always in the thick of things, and you probably saw people like, stealing names, stealing moves, and all that stuff. And you kind of feel, people kind of felt slighted for that kind of stuff.
You can feel slighted all you want, but the one guy had forethought and you have afterthought. So you know what? Be mad at yourself. No, I'm dead serious.
No, I get you.
Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons would not get along if he subscribed to that logic, because Gene owns everything. Him and Paul own the name Kiss, and they get to make all the decisions together. But Gene goes out and whores it out, like the lunch boxes and all that stuff. Paul's bitchy at first until those checks start rolling in. Then he's like, okay. But the point is, Gene Simmons, probably to this day, sits around and reads the patent book, and he finds stuff that's going to expire soon. And the day it expires, he goes and buys the patent. One of the patents he bought was Whiteout, because Whiteout was coming up for the renewal. And you know who invented Whiteout?
Who?
The tall, boring guy from the Monkees, who quit and didn't do all the stuff in the 80s when they got back together till the end. I forget his name.
Mickey Dolenz
his
or something?
Mother. Huh?
Mickey Dolenz or something like that?
No, Mickey Dolenz, Davy Jones, and Pete Wentz.
Peter Tork.
Those three kept going. The other guy, Chris Naismith, his mother invented Whiteout.
Oh,
and
really?
When and he inherited all her money when she died. So he's like, I don't need to be in the Monkees, because those guys were actors. The Monkees was actually a role, and then they just turned it into a music career. But Gene Simmons bought the patent for Whiteout because it was coming up, and he's like, I'll take that. Now, anytime there's Whiteout on a bottle, Gene Simmons gets a check, and he's smart. That's, he knows to do that. His son's band, they had a name. I forget what it was called. We'll just call it Bad Company for the topic at hand today. And there was another band called Bad Company, and they were like, hey man, you can't use that name. And then Gene goes, did they copyright it? And they go, yeah. He goes, all right, then go get a new name and copyright it. He goes, you know what name's not copywritten? And his son's like, what? He goes, Engine, as in search engine. So he told his son to name his band Search Engine and buy the copyright. That means any online shit that uses the term search engine, he's got to get money. He didn't do it. But that's Gene Simmons' forethinking. He's like, there's shit out there to make shit just waiting to get made money. And Mickey Mouse, I don't know if you know this, the longest you can have a patent on something is 100 years. Right? After that, it becomes public domain. Disney was going to lose Mickey Mouse around 2000, and the courts were like, because they're still Disney heirs, right? Like the grandkids and great grandkids, they let them redo it. But other than that, you're about to see Mickey Mouse on everything, because they didn't have to ask permission no more. They didn't have to pay royalties. You know how when you sing a song on Facebook and it gets muted out because it's copywriting? If it's considered a standard, which is I think 50 years or older, you don't have to have permission, and it's not copywritten, like Christmas songs. But I just gave you a little education there. But Davey Boy Smith did nothing to Dynamite. He did something for himself, and if Dynamite felt slighted, it's because he didn't even think to do it. Now maybe he thinks Davey Boy should have bought it together. That's a different argument. But to think he stole it from him, no, he didn't. It was Vince's, and he bought it from him. You could have done the same thing. He just had the idea to do it, and you did it. A lot of people get mad at people for doing shit before they do it.
No.
Don't be mad.
Again, it depends on how you look at it. Again, Davey Boy was shrewd but smart, and that's why people remember Davey Boy more than probably Davey Boy as the British Bulldog than the British Bulldogs. That's another reason why, again, and I'm not saying that again, it's subjective, TW, but that's why the British Bulldogs sometimes are taken off the top 10 because of the elongated career of Davey Boy taking the name British Bulldog.
I personally hated that he called himself the British Bulldog because I took it as a slight. Like, dude, come on, man. Just be Davey Boy Smith. You know, be dirty Davey Boy Smith if you got to be, you know, whatever. The Duchess or the Duke Davey Boy Smith. Just call himself the British Bulldog. By the way, I wasn't mad at Davey Boy. I was mad at Vince because I thought Vince made him call him that. But if you're telling me he owned the name, then it's him. It's him making his money.
Right.
Oh, I forgot to show you this. I got one toy this week.
Oh, the Big Boss Man. I thought you were going to show me a British Bulldog stuff.
No, I got him around here. Oh, there he is. They don't have Dynamite stuff unless you want to buy it from the Hack Cardona. They got a figure like that coming out for Dynamite, but they're $50 each. It's a scam, man.
I think the only Dynamite kid available was the LJNs from 1985-6.
Well, there's a new one now. The what the hell you call it? Major podcast show or whatever. They create figures. They pay companies to make figures. They're called Heels and Faces, and they're making a Dynamite that looks like that Davey Boy. And I was gonna buy it, put him with my Davey Boy, but they want $49.95 for a little $10, $5 toy, and I'm not doing it.
Well, to put a bow on this Reflection Ice again, Davey Boy had more of a storied singles career with the moniker the British Bulldogs, and of course, the Dynamite Kid retired in 1993, but he was subjected more because of his ailments. TW, he was subjected to be in a wheelchair, and he was subjected to hospice care, and he died at the age of 60 in 2017 or 2018, respectively. Alone. And again, you know, a single man doing what he did. Well, he had kids, but again, I guess they were bastard kids in his eyes because whatever the case may be. And
Darby
of course,
Allin, Baby Richards, he had them all.
And Davey Boy Smith died abruptly in 2002 or 2003 from a heart attack, but that was years of steroid abuse, years of drug abuse. TW. So
WCW killed that man. By putting that stupid trap door in for the Ultimate Warrior, I killed Davey Boy Smith.
Yeah, I'm not gonna.
You know the story, right?
I remember that because of
he took a bump on the hinge. There's a fucking hinge in the ring, and they got guys wrestling around so the Warrior can trap door. Stupid. Just turn the lights out, have him crawl out from under the ring, and stand in the ring like everyone else. So once that happened, it ruined his career. He got hooked on pain pills, and he was sleeping on his couch all day, every day, doing pain pills until his heart stopped. That's WCW's fault.
But, TW, let's put a happy spin on this. So let's put a bow on the British Bulldogs. So let's give your final thoughts on the British Bulldogs and how much they meant to you. Just expound on it since, they kind of influenced TW and Los Rudos. Are you there?
What happened?
Oh, no. I said
I got distracted by tag me on something.
I thought it was the network. I thought it was Biden doing something on me. I said, let's put a bow on this. Give us happy thoughts about the British Bulldogs and anything that you want to talk about.
Dude, Wembley Stadium, like Bulldog versus Brett. It's one of the greatest matches of all time. It's even better when you know the backstory.
But you see, you keep going with the one guy. I'm trying to say the Bulldogs.
No.
Plural.
I'm gonna go back. But I'm saying we don't get Davey Boy versus Brett if we don't have all the stuff we've talked about. The four of them coming in together when Calgary got raided. We don't get it if Dynamite doesn't get hurt because maybe they stay a tag team. So I'm trying to find the good and the bad of the injury to Dynamite, and it's I've always had this sadness for Davey Boy. Weirdly enough, I didn't have it for Dynamite, and it's probably because out of sight, out of mind. You mentioned that earlier, and also he wasn't very well liked. For all reasons, you almost felt like it was his karma, which I don't believe in. I don't want that to happen to anybody, even people I don't like. I don't want Biden falling off his bike and falling off these stages. I want them to put that guy in the corner with an ice cream and just make sure he's okay. I don't want people hurt, But Davey Boy, I always had this soft spot for him. He's always been one of my favorite guys, like unsung. I wish he would have won a world title. I understand why he didn't. Razor Ramon, same thing. They get in their own way. But as messed up as he was, as worried as Brett was when they were out there because they didn't know where Davey Boy was for 48 hours, he showed up and he did it. Even if it was listening to Brett, he always had it. And Dynamite had it too. Dynamite he burned through it too fast. But I promise you, the British Bulldogs, the powder blue, the red, white, and blue with the Union Jack flag, the half blue, half red boot with the inseam white and the outside, one is red, one is blue. All that stuff, they're iconic to me. This room would be full of Bulldog merchandise if Bulldogs merchandise, if it was available. They are absolutely part of the reason that I got hooked on pro wrestling. They were probably the first storyline that I got caught up in, because I want to say it was the fall of 86 when I saw that Andre the Giant stuff. They went to Saturday morning, and that was the hot thing when I started watching wrestling, were the Bulldogs and the Hart Foundation. Actually, no, the Bulldogs and the Dream Team. That was that fall of 86 into spring of 87, winning the belts. And I never, ever was not a fan of them. And so I said it before, when we did our tag team ratings, I never really put them up high enough on there because, A, it was so long ago, right? They haven't been a team, in my eyes, because I didn't see none of that Calgary stuff. I read about it in magazines. So you're talking 88 to now, which is 35 years ago, was their end. Which, by the way, I didn't like the finish of the demolition match either. Just double axe handle to the back of the head and he's dead. I don't like that. But those guys, they inspired smaller dudes that they could do it. They also inspired people who were small that were in a tag team because they thought that was their only way in to be a singles guy after. But whether it be Sean or Brett, even, Brett probably did it before Davey, but they all did it. And Dynamite is tragic. It's absolutely tragic. Again, if he didn't burn as many bridges, there'd probably be more flowers headed his way, if you will. But he gets relegated to dark side of the ring and all that stuff. But I would say this: I would hope those guys loved every second of it, right? Like, to give everything they gave. I would hope it wasn't just a job at one point. Maybe in '93, when you're struggling to get out of bed and you got to do it, that's different. But
I would hope you would put them in the WWE Hall of Fame, because they do deserve it. They do deserve it because they have a WrestleMania moment with the way they won. They have a history.
They have a SummerSlam moment with Davey Boy at the very. I mean, they're all tied together. I can't. So you say I keep talking about the one and not the other. I can't think of Davey Boy without thinking of Dynamite. I can't. Even by himself. I mean, imagine how awesome Dynamite would have been in the Hart Foundation. He would have been the best talker there. He would have been fucking loving being a heel. He would have been awesome in the Hart Foundation. And I wouldn't even need to bump nobody. You just have another guy, Neidhart, Bulldog, Brett, Owen, Pillman, and Dynamite. It would have been awesome.
That's a good what if. What if Dynamite was healthy enough to be in the Hart Foundation
jacket with no sleeves, with the fucking gimmick on the back, and he wouldn't have had the Hart Foundation logo. He would have had that small, and he would have had a big ass Union Jack flag on the back of his jacket, and he might have even been the leader, co-leader at the very least.
What could have been. And with that being said, we close on this pro wrestling spotlight, this tag team spotlight, honoring the memory of Dynamite Kid, Tom Billington, and Davey Boy Smith, collectively known as the British Bulldogs. So what we're going to do next week, Reflectionites? I'm actually kind of excited for TW on this one because, I always like to give TW something that he could smile about. And for next week, Reflectionites, we're going back to the movies. Now, TW might not smile because we're going to watch a movie, we do a movie episode, but I didn't tell you what we're going to do, TW, so this might make you smile. We are going to relive an infamous episode of The Adventures of Superboy. Ooh. And the reason we're going to talk about this one, because in 1990, Reflectionites, Season 3, the episode was called Mindscape, and there was a very special appearance with an evil Superman by the name of the Total Package, Lex Luger.
I half-ass remember that. That was Season 3?
Yes. So we're going to enjoy.
I got another movie for us for when we do it again. I'll tell you off air.
But TW was smiling. He's a little bit giddy knowing that it's not only the Total Package Lex Luger.
Superman.
And it's Superman. Superboy. But next week, we are going to the movies, and we're going to do an episode, The Adventures of Superboy, guest starring the Total Package Lex Luger. So, TW, give out those socials so we can get out of here.
Yeah. So, the Pro Wrestling Coalition Network sponsors us at Podbean, at PWC Network at podbean.com, also Hameen Media Group at podbean.com, and also HMG at channelattitude.com. Our handle's at PW Reflection. Big Ray Hernandez, you can find him everywhere on social media. All you gotta do is put at and then write Big Ray Hernandez with no spaces, and you can find him every Wednesday on the Next Level podcast as well. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at TommyWonder19X, or you can find me on my babyface Twitter and TikTok is at the Tommy Wonder. Snapchat
Is it really babyface or is it tweener?
It's all heel now. I try to stay off of there. I find myself writing stuff and then just backing out of it because it's, if I have nothing good to say, don't say nothing at all. Because people are so stupid. I have to say stuff sometimes. I have to point out their dumbness.
It's fine.
But at the Tommy Wonder is my TikTok and my good guy tweener Twitter. Facebook.com/Tommy Wonder. Snapchat is #Wonder. And then you can find Big Vito and Noel at bigvitobrand.wixsite.com. Patreon.com/The Big Vito Brand, and you can watch the early release of this video and every other video at twitch.tv/The Big Vito Brand.
And you can find me on my excerpt at PWHustle that's PWHustle Prof. And if this gets uploaded by 8-Track Brown, this will be available on the PWHustle YouTube networks. Follow my brothers in arms, the man of the Wednesday locker room, Billy Ray Valentine at Obi-Wan, you know me, and of course the king of the reactions, Walking Dead Daryl Dixon's back, so get ready for those reactions. Ahsoka reactions with 8-Track Brown at the #8, TRAC Brown. And again, next week we're going back to the movies, doing The Adventures of Superboy with guest star, the total package Lex Luger. And with that being said, I'm the Professor Chababa Cruz, and that's my man, my brother from another mother, the conservative liberal, the liberal conservative. Woo! Tommy Wonder saying good night, and we'll see you next time here at the PWR podcast at the Hameen Media Group at podbean.com. Sharon! How the hell did? Oh yeah, that's Ozzy. Okay. I like, what the hell did I got to do with the Bulldogs?